and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stober. Now, after almost 2 decades of legislative maneuver by successive administrations, the recent passage and subsequent assent, the Petroleum Industry Act has continued to receive accolades from key players in the oil and gas sector, including communities of the oil-rich Niger Delta. Now, to further demonstrate commitment to realizing the content of the Act, President Muhammadu Buhari approved the constitution of a steering committee to oversee the process of a paradigm shift that will improve revenue drive and impact host communities. Tonight, Tuesday Live will x-ray the implementation process and future benefits of the Petroleum Industry Act, as well as factors to watch out for in achieving seamless transition and implementation that will allay the fears and expectations of all parties involved. But before we go into the discussion, let's get to see this report by Lydia Sampson.
It became obvious that for the oil and gas industry and state-owned oil firms to operate effectively and efficiently, a new act to repeal the over 5-decade-old regulations that govern the sector is critically needed. Key player says President Muhammadu Buhari has written his name in gold by assenting to and giving the industry a new lease that will continue to foster partnerships across the entire oil and gas value chain. Despite the benefits contained in the new law, there are also concerns, and experts are quick to emphasize that there are no perfect laws.
What is really beautiful there is that it's not just celebrating, it's what are the next step forward. It's really time for us to engage, get investment, push Nigeria, because Nigeria's story has really not been told. And I think if we don't start embracing that Nigeria story of making gas as part of that transition fuel in an era of energy transition, but also really driving Nigerian host communities and bringing in investment.
The dedication of 30% frontier exploration funds to take care of exploration and development activities of oil discoveries is generating a heated debate. Some argue that global communities, including international oil companies, are looking for alternatives to fossil fuel, while others says fossil fuel remain critical and countries endowed with it must make haste to harness and maximize its value.
I think the general news is that it is a very good thing that's happened to our country. It's an exciting news for our industry, and certainly for us as the private sector, we are very excited. So well done to the federal government and to the House.
Section 57 of the Act provides for NNPC Limited to absorb the employees of NNPC and its subsidiaries on terms and conditions not less favorable than enjoyed before the transfer of the service, including entitlements and pension. The law provides for 2 regulatory agencies in the oil and gas sector: the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission and the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. The Commission has the power to acquire, hold and dispose of property, responsible for technical and commercial regulation of upstream petroleum operations, as well as the grant of licenses. The authority, on the other hand, takes care of the aspects of the midstream and downstream sectors, including granting of individual licenses and permits. The law provides for host community development trusts to foster sustainable prosperity, enhancement of peace, cordial relationship between oil and gas companies and host communities for greater economic growth. The fund is expected to be incorporated within 12 months after commencement date of new or existing oil mining leases. The law also made provisions for fiscal framework based on core principles of clarity, dynamism and fiscal policies. In Abuja, Lydia Sampson.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. We'd like to welcome to this program distinguished Senator Basi Akpan Albert. He is Chairman, Senate Committee on Petroleum Resources Upstream and Co-Chairman, Senate Committee on Petroleum Industry Bill. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Sir for having me here. Good evening.
We are also joined tonight on the discussion by Bala Zaka, a petroleum engineer and an expert in oil and gas. He joins us from our Lagos Network Center. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
Let me also introduce Professor Yinka Omoregbe, Research Professor, Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and President, Nigerian Society of Energy Economists, joining us via Zoom from Houston in the United States. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Let me also welcome to this program Dr. Timothy Okon, Petroleum Economist and Managing Partner, Tenno Energy Resource, a former Group Executive Director of the NNPC. He also joins us via Zoom. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
And also joining us is Dr. Kailani Mohammed, an engineer, a former workers' representative, Kaduna Refinery and Petrochemical, National Publicity Secretary, Presidential Support Committee, and publisher of the Liberator magazine. He joins us via Zoom from Kaduna. Kailani Mohammed, good to see you.
Sirs Toba, thank you very much. Long time we have not seen.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we're set to go just for this little matter of acquainting you with the process. By now, you should be conversant with the process of this program, but let's refresh your memory. At the appropriate time, you can get to be part of the discussion in the studio. The numbers will be on your screen, so we advise you take advantage of those numbers. You phone in. However, we always remind you, when you do call in and your call gets passed to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set so we can avoid the hurlback or echo, and go straight to the point, ask your question or make a comment. Don't waste time on greetings, just go straight to the point so others can get on the platform as well and contribute their own ideas on the subject matter. So once again, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. It's all about implementing the Petroleum Industry Act. So let's begin, and we turn to Senator Basi Akpan Albert and say, what are the critical elements of this Petroleum Industry Act?
Well, Siri, thank you so much for actually having me here. And then kudos to all Nigerians. Congratulations for demonstrating willingness to join the global oil and gas industries. Cyril, this act was signed into law by Mr. President. Let me, even before then, also congratulate Mr. President for the confidence he reposes in the National Assembly. Immediately he came back from its medical checks abroad. He signed it in less than 48 hours. And Cyril, I just came back from Houston too, where I attended the OTC, which is the Offshore Technology Conference, which is the Global Oil and Gas Conference for the upstream operations. And I can tell you that the world is excited about Mr. President signing this bill into law. This bill, like you rightly say, had been in contentions in the National Assembly in the last 20 years, 21 years or thereabout. It has passed through about 3 or 4 presidents of this country, several Senate presidents and speakers. I think this is one of the key outputs of what I term the effective collaboration between the executive and the parliament. And I believe that we have all written our names in gold, that it is an era where Mr. President was Mr. President, and then Ahmad Lawan was the Senate President, Femi was the Speaker, and I was privileged to be in the Parliament that this bill, the jinx, like I said, was actually broken. This is a 5-chapter act, and then the winning, I can say with all amount of conviction that Nigerians are all winners, because for once upon a time that we'll begin to see a national oil company that is run as a karma company and to return profit to its shareholder, which is all with the Nigerian Federation. So it's the 5-chapter act, and of course the first act that talks about the governance, which is the creation of the 2 regulatory agencies, one for the upstream operations and then one for midstream and downstream. Currently, all these operations are currently handled by just DPR. And of course, you know that one of the greater emphasis of this act is like we are going, the global energy business is going through a transition from fossil fuel, which is crude oil, crude oil into cleaner energy. So the greater focus of the transition is now gas. That's one of the key aspects that this bill has actually addressed, where we can actually begin to deepen domestic use of gas. And we also have a chapter that talks about the administration, which is clarity, because one of the objectives of a good law is clarity, because what an investor looks at is the ease of doing business and the clarity of your law. So we have also addressed that, and we also bring to speed laws that were in operation past 50 years ago, so they were quite obsolete. Then the other aspect of the chapter also talks about the incentive, which is the fiscals, which is on the tax side and also on the fiscal side in terms of royalties and all that. So then it talks about, then you have the miscellaneous items, which is also addressed by a single chapter. So I think it's an all-encompassing piece of legislation, where it has created a one-stop booklet where an investor will look at Nigeria from the perspective of that booklet, taking into cognizance other competitive areas of where an investor could also take his funds to. So it's I think it's a good law, and I give kudos to all Nigerians.
All right, quite comprehensive. But let's go over to our Lagos Center and talk to Balazaka. What are your thoughts on this act?
What the president has done is worthy of praise and emulation. Though before assenting to the bill, we had different concerns, including myself. And some people expected that there were some dots some I's that needed to be dotted. There were some T's that needed to be crossed. But we are now talking about a law or an act now. And all we need to do as Nigerians is to see how we can key into the global energy mainstream and take advantage of whatever we can take advantage of. But even as we speak, depending on who you're talking to, you know, some may be happy, some may not be happy, some will have their concerns. So it depends on whether you're talking to an oil and gas journalist, an oil and gas economist, an oil and gas lawyer, whether you're talking to an oil and gas environmentalist, or whether you're talking to the person on the street. So it all depends. But I think overall, what has happened is worthy of praise and emulation. And with this now, I mean, we had a stream that was almost dead. The midstream didn't probably exist after some time, because you're talking about hauling of this crude oil from the wellhead or where it has been produced, you know, to where it needs to be refined, you know. So it almost didn't exist. And if it comes on stream and in national interest, we handle it very well. I mean, lots of jobs will be created. Then to a reasonable extent, so much will happen in the downstream, because you'll be talking about finished product now. But fundamentally, you know, regardless of all the conditions you're going to talk about, we're talking about an international product here. You know, crude oil or gas is an international commodity. So to a reasonable extent, you just, regardless of all the conditions and criteria we're going to talk about, you must satisfy at least two conditions. And the first one is international acceptance, while the second one is local tolerance. So when you talk about international acceptance, I mean, it's coming from the kind of product we're dealing with and the kind of players or key stakeholders that will be involved. Because when you talk about international oil companies, you're talking about foreign investors. When you talk about a cartel, crude oil cartel like OPEC, you're talking about international players here. When you talk about gas exporting countries, forum that has to do with gas, you're also talking about an international cartel. So you must satisfy that international condition for people to be able to come in and contract. Then the second one, like we said, is local tolerance. Regardless of all the contracts you're going to go into or the discussions we are going to have, at the end of the day, we will be talking about Nigerians. We will be talking about local communities. We will be talking about ordinary Nigerians who need to see the advantage of that, you know, start doing one or two things, contribute to the aggregate economy, and the GDP, and make sure they also comply with their civic responsibilities of paying taxes and levies.
All right, thanks so much. And well, let's go over to Houston. Let's talk to Professor Moregbe. Well, like Balazaka said, at the end of the day, it's going to be all about Nigeria, how this act impacts on the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian people. So let's hear it from your point of view.
Very much. You're very right with what you're talking about. It's about how it impacts on us. And so one thing that I have emphasized very much whenever I have talked about this is the necessity for us not to get carried away by the fact that a law has been passed. A law has been passed, but the law has to be implemented. It is when it is implemented that we will really be able to see what the benefits are or not. Now, when you're talking about the Nigerian public, we need to realize that there are some exciting provisions in the law. There are some exciting sections. I think one of the previous speakers has talked about a new, there's a framework, there's a legal framework for gas now. There's a bigger legal framework for the liquids of the petroleum industry. There's a framework for the midstream and the downstream. I've always said that when you're looking at the petroleum industry, when you're talking about crude oil, the unrefined products, you are talking about making money. But when you're talking about the downstream, you're talking about the development. It is when you grow your downstream and that you actually end up with an industry that impacts upon the people positively. It's really because we haven't done that. We haven't been able to do what we really should have done to ensure that the industry impacts positively upon Nigerians, that we have had the sort of problems that have deviled the industry up until now. It's a great thing. It's been, in a sense, 20 years in making, but 13 years if you're talking about when the first PIB came in. So it is a joyous occasion to find that finally the Petroleum Industry Bill has become the Petroleum Industry Act. But the steps to implementation are vitally important. So it's also a great step to find that a committee has already been established and given this task. We just pray that they will move in leaps and bounds so that before the end of this year, we will be able to say something that is positive. We will be able to have started seeing the implementation.
All right. So many Nigerians too are upbeat about how this is going to play out and the implementation. Let's find out from Dr. Timothy Okon, the petroleum economist. Let's hear you. People are expecting that this act will finally address numerous issues in the industry. And like the distinguished senator said earlier on, so many things have been obsolete. And this law is in keeping with best practices. Do you see it as so?
Thank you very much again. Thank you for having me. In many respects, I think I echo what is being said. I think the intentions of the law and the intentment really is to, like Professor Marugbe said, move away from just the extraction business and go now into the processing, which is where you have the midstream, as the processing and then the development of the hydrocarbon sector. And when I talk about processing, it goes beyond just the fuels, because there are non-fuels in the hydrocarbon value chain, which enables you to have a chemicals industry, for example. Nigeria, for example, has no methanol plant. You need to be in a position where you are developing industries that emanate from the processing of hydrocarbons. That is really what is intended, and having a regulatory system that ensures that we have a set of rules to go by, and what regulators are umpires. So channel and encourage investment in that sector. And people have mentioned gas, quite importantly so. If we're thinking of energy transition, moving away from less fuels that are less pollutants, the environmental footprint of oil, for example, is far, far impactful than say the environmental footprint of gas. But I think that in moving into gas, I think you can grow the economy, especially the agricultural sector, etc. When you are talking about fertilizers and so on and so forth, that would actually impact the largest contributor to GDP, which is really not oil and gas. The oil's contributed GDP is approximately between 6 to 9%, depending on the price of oil at any point in time, etc. In order to improve that, we need to be doing a lot of things at home, which is refine the product itself, and I mean refine crude oil, process gas into all sorts of things, methanol, gas to liquid fertilizers, petrochemicals in particular, which you now need to go into the manufacturing process. Using hydrocarbons, you can do this very convincingly. And obviously, Nigeria must address its serious unemployment challenges. And that it developed midstream, for example, the costs of creating a job in the midstream and downstream is far, far less than sometimes in the upstream. If you go into manufacturing, for example, if you have a petrochemical plant or plants that make shoes, etc., from petrochemical products, a variety of things that emanate from processing hydrocarbons. So we see the potential for a great impact on gross domestic product. That is really the key to wanting to have a system that you have regulatory oversight over the midstream in particular, and you begin to encourage investments in these critical areas. Of course, fertilizers, we have soils in Nigeria that are probably the most under-fertilized and underutilized soils. And if we can transform agriculture through fertilizer schemes, etc., arising from fertilizer plants that will be built, and if you look at the schedules, one of the schedules about pricing of gas, because price is an important signal, then it gives encouragement to those who would come not only to do extraction, but those who would come also to invest in the manufacturing sector and begin to improve the economic conditions across this country. So again, I just echo the general sentiment around, and I also want to say the implementation is a key part of it. It's a three-tier system. The steering committee, a working group, and then there'll be the teams that are working in the organizations that currently exist that are going to transmute into the different new entities that have been created. So it's robust, and I think that the challenge, this is where the challenges would be, but I think that with professional management, I think we can achieve that. I add that the PIB is very specific about how these changes are to be implemented. So there are specific timelines in the law. And so, of course, those timelines, I believe the committee itself will have to adhere to those and to ensure that the timetable is right and that we keep to not only the letter but the spirit of the law itself. Yeah.
All All right, we'll come to some of the challenges as we progress with this discussion. But let's go back to Kaduna now and link up with Engineer Kelani Mohammed, who's a former workers' representative of the Kaduna Refinery and Petrochemical Company. Kelani Mohammed, let's hear you.
Mr. Cyril, thank you very much. I think all the discussions have said it all. The new PIB Act is a good omen for this country. We have been fighting for it in the last 20 years. During Obasanjo, it was discussed briefly. During Eradua, he was trying to push it, but something along the line came while of blessed memory, he died. During Mr. Goodluck Jonathan, it was not even spoken about. But we have to give kudos today to Mr. President. I think what has happened today to Nigeria is something that we have to celebrate. That's number one. Number two, the National Assembly, which keyed in with the executive to make sure that this law was passed. And also the Minister of Petroleum, including the GMD, Mr. Mele Kere, for steadfastly in making sure that this law was passed, despite all the rigmaroles, despite all the attacks from different corners. This bill or this act is going to be good for this country. That's number one. The second aspect of it is that Mr. Zaka from Lagos spoke about how it's going to affect the masses. Well, I believe with this new act, where NMPC is going to be independent without any influence or interference from outside, the management will be able to take decisions that will make the economy of this country grow, prosperity, and the development of our country. What we are expecting is that we have joint ventures, the cash costs, the taxes, the royalties, and the assets. I think when it is properly managed, Nigeria is going to be at a worse, and our economy sincerely is going to improve very soon. Only what we are saying is that the steering committee has been given 12 months by Mr. President. We are envisaging that it's too far. Under 6 months, according to that, it said between 6 months and 12 months. So if they can do that between 6 months and make sure that this implementation is carried out as quickly as possible, I think the way what we are facing in Nigeria today will be asked of the question. The issue of the downstream is what bothers me first, because I worked in the refinery. These refineries can last for 100 years. For example, Kaduna Refinery has the last one of about 100 years, and it has been operated only for about 40 years. All the equipment, ranging from pumps, from instruments, from compressors, heat exchangers, boilers, all these things, once we can make sure that they are replaced, believe you me, we are going to have new refineries. And the issue of taking our crude outside to refine and bring them back into their country with landing costs, which is being meted to the masses, that one will be reduced. When we are actually refining our crude in Nigeria, that will help us a lot. Thirdly, is the issue of the last man that raised the issue of petrochemicals. We studied petrochemicals in the 80s, and we know the viability. If we have carbon black in Wari, and we have linear alkene benzene in Kaduna, while we have polypropylene in Port Harcourt, if we are able to bring these issues and tackle them correctly. Believe you me, sincerely, the issue of agriculture is talking about the issue of fertilizer. There will be no importation anymore. So we want the strict.
All right, you know, Kalani Mohammed, we'll come back to you. Just a quick one here. It would seem that someone's finger is a bit is obstructing your camera just a bit. So if they can just move their hand off the camera lens, okay. Yes, we'll be able to see you more clearly. But we'll return to you. You've raised so many issues, and some of these issues have also been alluded to by other discussants. It's time to implement. Everyone has celebrated this document, this law, and all the backslapping and congratulations. Now the real work begins. Even with the committee, you heard Kelaini Mohammed, they're saying, look, the time the committee has been given is too long. You can do it in a shorter time, you can do it quicker. Okay? Dr. Okon also talked about adhering strictly to the timelines. And if you ask the everyday person on the street, they'll say one of the biggest challenges with Nigeria is implementing, following through with good plans and good laws. What's your take on that?
Well, Cyril, let me say here that this is where the National Assembly comes in. I'm also very happy that as members of the National Assembly, I got a call from the Senate President last week when the President signed this into law. He said by the time we are resuming, all our joint committees must be on their toes, because the timelines are embedded in the law, so nobody will want to break the law. So the first thing we will do when we come back at the National Assembly is to invite the committee headed by the minister, come and brief us on your roadmap in terms of achieving the timeline. These timelines are very explicit, they're embedded in a law, and anything out of that is you are going out of the law. So I think greater emphasis on our part as the National Assembly will be placed on oversight. Oversight to get the right things gets done. And that's what I can assure Nigerians. Don't worry. The key thing is that we've overcome the first hurdle of getting a law. And let us now begin to do a roadshow to the global business community that come. Nigeria is not ready for investment. We must be able to attract investment first of all before we talk about anything else. If not, we'll die with the oil in our country, because greater emphasis is being placed right now on energy transition. So we must also flow with the global competitiveness.
Well, Balazaka, some Nigerians have called for what they say is cautious optimism. Now, because we've had such a raw deal in the past regarding petroleum, the running of the petroleum industry, there's a tendency that everyone would be expecting so much. Do you look at this law and its implementation, and do you share the view of cautious optimism?
And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, if the steering committee period is extended beyond 1 year, I will still appreciate it. To be honest, there are so many things that we need to look in there, and so much now rests on the steering committee, because virtually all the sentiments of the stakeholders will now be borne by the steering committee, and I pray that they will have the dexterity to know how to have things implemented. I'm saying this because it's very, very important. You know, when we talk about the upstream is almost like people will say squeaky clean. You know, the operation there is so technical, and like people will say, you don't have the real products there to consume. So that area is very technical. There is probably little or no chances of corruption. But like we said, now that we now have an act, the midstream will come alive. But most importantly, the downstream is the one that will really get Nigerians very, very busy. And as far as I'm concerned, that area needs to be looked into seriously. For example, it's very clear that the downstream will be deregulated. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't support deregulation 10 years ago. The records are there. I didn't support it 5 years ago. I don't also support it now. And the worst one now is probably import-focused deregulation. And I predicated that on what Nigeria is going through. Because for any import-focused deregulation, look at the value of your currency. It's sinking due to devaluation or depreciation. Look at the inflation. Look at your balance of trade. It's almost heading towards zero. Look at the business climate hostilities. So to a reasonable extent, people like me have always been against that, and I have my reasons. Because if, as we speak now, for you to afford or to buy a sachet of pure water, which is equivalent to just a cup of water, you have to part with one up to 20 pieces of Nigerian naira. Just imagine what will happen when we deregulate. As we speak now, I mean, a 12.5 kg of cooking gas or LPG is about 6,000 naira. Just imagine what will happen. You know, we know what, I mean, a liter of diesel is like 290,000, 290 naira. Just imagine what will happen. In fact, even as we speak, so many small and medium scale industries and enterprises have closed shop. The strategic commercial sector is almost folding up. The strategic industrial sector is growing. So there are so many things we need to look into. Yes, we say we want to move towards cleaner fossil fuel, right? And people need to come in and stop using firewood. You know, we should stop deforestation. But look at what is happening to also cooking gas, which is supposed to be the product of crude oil refining. So there are so many things we just need to look at because it's just very important. The only way you grow the economy is by making sure people are busy, but positively busy. And that is the only way you can grow the GDP. So when we get into the real discussion, honestly, some of us have our concerns, but like we said, the steering committee is there. They have so much. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, they are likely to have so much more than even the National Assembly to contend with.
Also, Abaregbe, do you have concerns about the impending deregulation and the impact of this on ordinary folks? Because you know, quite a number of people have always spoken against what they see as deregulation and its likely impact. And a few examples there, which Balazaka has given, including that of cooking gas, which I'm told is up to almost 6,500 naira, way beyond. And by the time this law that we celebrate now comes into effect, there will be deregulation. So what will be the fate of, if you like the term, the common Nigerian?
I have to say that I am definitely in favor of deregulation. At the time, I wasn't. But the truth is that the more you look at the downstream, the more you're going to see that we will benefit more. It is a very opaque place, and there are a lot of very bad practices in the downstream. The best way is to deregulate, let the government come out. In the first place, we cannot afford whatever it is we're spending on subsidies. We have gained no benefits from this money all this time. There is no sense in continuing. Practically speaking, Nigerians are not benefiting from the downstream in the way it is right now. So what we need is to remove all these different, what I will see as restrictions. Basically, go in and let the market decide. The market decides, and usually you fall into a price situation that is comfortable to an extent. A lot of people give examples when they're talking about deregulation. They give examples with mobile phones, and we remember the days of not NEPA, NITEL. NITEL as a distant, very depressing history and see what can happen when you actually let market forces come in. When you look at other countries around, deregulated countries, you find a downstream that is functioning perfectly, a downstream that doesn't have any hidden costs at all, doesn't have any blockages, doesn't have some things that are happening that we all know about. For example, the various alternative petroleum products markets that are also producing products very, very extensively and selling them all over the country. You're able to have something that is open. When you have an open market, you remove all the things that are opaque. You end up with something that is much better, that actually impacts on the people. We're now able to utilize the trillions that are supposedly being used on subsidies for something else. Nigeria actually can't afford subsidies. Very, very simply, very simply stated.
Well, we'll extend this, but at this point in time, let's bring in a couple of reports which we have prepared to deal with the subject matter. And the first one is coming from Port Harcourt. Of course, Port Harcourt is significant here. It hosts a refinery, and the issues that we are just getting into now would be the likely impact of a deregulation, the other side of it all, and how it will impact on the economy. Let's see this report from Port Harcourt.
The Petroleum Industry Act provides for the legal, governance, regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry. Chapter 3 captures host community development with the objective of fostering sustainable prosperity within the host communities, provide direct social and economic benefits towards harmonious coexistence for all stakeholders. Drawing from the historical perspective that translated to the passage of the Act, stakeholders see it as a paradigm shift for the host communities.
It's a good thing. We are very happy that we are so included. We are not going to be puppets by the local government or the state government. We are dealing directly with the federal government to take our own development in our hands. That's a good thing.
I want to commend the effort of Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, for listening to the yearning of the people. This long-awaited bill has been on the decks or on the floor of the National Assembly for a very long time.
With 75% of the funds to be channeled to capital projects, leaders from the host communities are optimistic that this could bring about the desired transformation.
Our concern on the PIA is whether there are provisions that are made that are beneficial to us as host communities. Well, the answer is yes. What we want is that the host communities have to select members into that trust body without political influence and bias.
I would want the implementation committee to co-opt, add our representatives, especially the traditional rulers, TrumpCon, in their meetings, so that they will tell them what the various communities need.
To analysts, the extent of community participation in project conception, development, and fund administration would make or mar the envisioned objective of the Act with respect to the host communities.
All right. Now we'll take the discussion to Dr. Timothy Okun, and we've just been talking about concerns on the downstream particularly. You think that would be one of the biggest challenges with implementing the Act?
I think the issue of the downstream in particular, and when you talk downstream, you're probably talking about the subsidy. The subsidy regime has to come to an end, because pricing is there are two ways in which pricing behaves, and I'm speaking from an economic point of view. Pricing is a signal. Pricing determines consumption levels. Right now, the problem with a subsidized price here in Nigeria is that our borders are leaking of petroleum products, and we don't actually know our own domestic demand because of the price differential. So it is more profitable for someone to take a liter of petrol, of course, a significant quantity of it, and to cross the border. So our governments are subsidizing not only the Nigerian citizenry, but far, far beyond that. So consumption, pricing is a key signal. It's an economic signal on consumption. Secondly, fuels are pollutants, and oftentimes what you do in economics is that you place and you impose a tax. For example, we have the FEMA tax, which is not applied, but it's in the law. For example, I can give you an example of Ghana, where there's a 12.5% tax, which is actually used for the healthcare system. Because, of course, petrol is a pollutant. Generally, they're called dirty fuels. And the way there is a social cost, and I lived and I worked in Indonesia, and you could, if you look at the number of mopeds and motorcycles and those who actually ride them, etc., there's a study that actually shows the impact of pollution on health. So again, it's important to understand this in that context, that fuels and Nigeria's passion for the Nigerian passion for having them as cheap as possible has an economic cost. And that economic cost is in the health, in all other aspects, which we can, which I think if you have what is generally referred to as the Peguvian tax, and it's a tax usually that captures the social cost, the pollution that fuels cause. So for those two reasons, we need to sunset the subsidy regime so that we can have some economic efficiency. You can improve the quality of the products. For example, in Nigeria, we just have PMS. In other jurisdictions, you can have premium, then you can have regular. It's all about choice, the market choosing what you want to get. So it's a matter of choice, and I believe that we cannot afford it. We have a fiscal situation here that is not sustainable, as you can see, and I can tell you from the studies that we have done, between 2006 and 2018, Nigeria spent close to $63 billion on subsidies. That is a staggering sum of money that it's mind-boggling, but that is exactly the kind of monies that, and I give this broad range so as not to, it covers different governments really. So between 2006 and 2018, we spent $63 billion on subsidy. It's just not sustainable, and we could improve our healthcare system. We could improve. There are so many social programs that you can better support, improving health, education, and actually capital investment, and the safety of many of these downstream operations in the country, and to save lives, because there's barely a month passes if you don't have a tanker that is all of that. It reflects the lack of cost recovery, and anybody in the downstream will tell you that the investment, the return on investment is really, with the compared to the rate of inflation, is nothing at all. So
Dr. Okon,
those are the things that we must tackle and improve.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Okon. But, the thing is, as we go to Dr. Kilani Mohammed, all the arguments so far, they show that, yes, the country cannot afford to continue a subsidy regime. But for many Nigerians, it wouldn't be the question. The question for them would be, will I be able to afford cooking gas? Will I be able to afford the cost of transportation, seeing that virtually everything in the country depends to a large extent on transportation? So this would be the question of the Nigerian. Would I be able to afford the expected hike in transport fares? Would I be able to afford cooking gas, given the state of the economy and the position of the Naira today? Kelani Mohammed. Mic, because we can't hear you. If you can hear me, just unmute your mic. Okay? If you can hear me, unmute your mic so we can hear you. We can't hear you right now. Okay? All right, we'll return to you, but I did say we have a number of reports. We have another coming in from Akure. So let's take the report from Akure, and when we return, we'll see if we can get Engineer Kelani Mohammed back on the line. Right? We'll continue, but let's come to Senator Basiak and Albert. Yes, I saw you.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yes, when we were talking about the likely costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You see, I think, Cyril, let me assure Nigerians that we know that nothing good comes easy. We took a study, we took a tour of all the refineries in Nigeria, including the Dangote refinery. We went to Kaduna Refinery, we were in Port Harcourt, we went to Dangote, we were in Walter Smith, and all the other refinery. And we have looked at this. And let me also say that what we have also discovered is that 90% of our revenue in terms of foreign exchange comes from the sales of our crude oil. 80% of the demand for Forex also is tied to petroleum products. So we believe that this is one law, if fully, effectively, and cautiously implemented, that you might not see the results in the next 1 or 2 years.
Right.
But in the next 3 to 4 years, the effect and the impact of what we have done will begin to manifest.
I suppose many people would need the reassurance that
yes, begin to manifest. Yes,
they'll still be around in 2 to 3 years' time when the benefits will come in.
It is law also
right.
that if you're a local refiner, maybe you're an NPC and all that, and you want to buy the crude oil, the law also allows you to pay part of that money in Naira, because part of the your expenditure is in Naira, while part is in foreign currency when you have to bring in parts. So these are some of the minutest and semantics that will, in the long run, in the shortest possible time, I can tell you, will bring about lesser pressure. And when there's less pressure on demand on dollar, the price of dollar will come down. So these are some of the things that we believe that, as a national, I'm very happy to be part of the National Assembly, because I have about 18 to 2 years to oversight the effective implementation of this law. So I believe that we properly gathered, and like others have actually expressed, that the implementation is paramount to the success of this law. And we have assured Mr. President that whatever we see in the course of implementing the law that needs to be amended by the National Assembly, it will be given expeditious attention.
Okay, so that, well, a lot of people would want to hear that. Yes. Really, say nothing is really cast in stone.
Nothing is cast in stone.
Okay,
yes.
All right. Well, let's see if we can get back Dr. Kelani Mohammed on the line and see if we can get to hear him loud and clear now. Hello, yes, can you hear us now? And well, you can hear us, but can we hear you? Let's hear you.
Mr. Cyril Stoba, can you hear me right now?
Right. Good.
Okay. The question you asked me, you see, this government has goodies for Nigerians. With this new PIA, many industries are going to spring up. You see, the economy today, even toothpick we import from overseas. Now, with the industries that are going to be springing up, our industries will be able to be manufacturing all the things we need in this country. That will give us dollars or foreign exchange from foreign countries. That will now strengthen our naira. That is number one. Number two, you can see gas to gas initiatives. We are supposed to be the fourth, gas exporting country all in the world. So if we utilize, since we have gas in trillions, with the 7 train projects and the AKK now that is being led from Ajokuta, from Wari, Ajokuta, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano, a lot of opportunities will come up. Many of our youths who are now, running around the streets without jobs will get jobs. And the issue of removal of subsidy, because of the total deregulation, definitely the price of payments has to go up. And the government has already put in place, as what they said, as a safeguard for the masses of this country so that they will not feel the effect of the removal of subsidy. And with this 3%, as I said before, for the host communities, and which the government is saying that it will go directly now, unlike before, that they will be giving the chiefs, the politicians of the Niger Delta, these, resources, which they don't see. I think it will improve, and I believe this government is willing to bring on, as we talk of transportation, we have now rails. We have rails that are now bringing down the prices of, transportation in this country. By the time they link Lagos to Port Harcourt, Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, Lagos to Mina, Mina to Kano, around the country as it was in the 60s, I believe the transportation cost is going to reduce to the barest minimum. And it is good for us because some people are now with this PIB Act, the northern part of this country, the oil we have in Lake Chad, Bida Basin, Sokoto Basin, and Benue Trough, they will be harnessed for the benefit of this country. So I believe the resources Nigeria is going to generate from this PIB is going to be very, very enormous. So all I'm saying is that our refineries must come on stream and new ones should be, established. If we do that, believe you me sincerely, the price of petroleum product will come down. Look at Japan. They don't have oil, but they have more than 30 refineries. Even some of our neighbors here, some, African countries, so that we'll be able to refine our products in-house, and then the landing costs or all these, the prices they normally put on it will be reduced. There will be no custom this thing on the oil again. It is duties will be disappear, and we are good to go. So I believe what we are saying, Nigerians should support this government and the new PIA, so that we will come to laugh at the end of the day. What Zaka said, that he didn't believe under 6 months this implementation will take place. For me, I'm an industry man, I'm a practical man. Believe you me sincerely, with the good people there that the government, the president chose, if they do the right thing under 6 months, before APC government elapses, we should be able to have the National Petroleum Company Limited that everybody will be proud of in this country.
At this point in time, we'll take a short break. There's still more ahead, but stay with us. When we return, we'll explore all the issues pertaining to the implementation of the PIA and hopefully getting a few telephone calls. Stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest asset the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth Entrepreneurship Support Years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. The discussion is about the Petroleum Industry Act and its implementation. At this point, we have another report which was put together here in Abuja. Let's get to see this.
Before the presidential assent of the Petroleum Industry Act, oil-producing communities, aside other benefits, relied on the 13% derivation fund paid to their respective state governments. Not satisfied with the utilization of the fund, agitations followed. Communities playing host to oil exploration companies demanded for a better deal. The Petroleum Industry Bill, now an act, some industry players say is the solution to the agitations. The act provides for 3% contribution of the actual annual operation cost of oil companies to their host communities. For Anab Sarah Igbe, a Niger Delta community leader, the Petroleum Industry Act will bring the much-desired development to host communities as against the state government-controlled 13% derivation formula adopted in the past.
Why don't we hold what we have, 3%? And that has not stopped the agitation. That has not stopped the kicking. It will get to a point that we will even insist that the 13% should no longer be given to the governors, but should be given to this commission. I want to see how this PIB bill operates.
With the passage and signing of the PIA, host communities, many say, now have the assurance of shared prosperity and peaceful coexistence with oil companies in their domain. Although a few are of the view that 3% is not ideal. For many others, however, it is a big win that can be improved upon in time.
That amount that we're talking about in 3% is more than twice the amount that goes into NDDC today.
It is the implementation of it that will give us an idea as to areas of challenges and the area that we need to look and try to amend if becomes necessary.
The Act has provisions for equitable and accountable utilization of the host communities fund. Experts are unanimous that this could be a major step towards finally putting the Niger Delta question to rest.
Well, putting the Niger Delta question to rest the host communities, and this has been one of the hottest controversies regarding the PIA. So let's talk about it. And easily the issues here, which you hear all over the place, have to do with the host communities, 3%, 30%. Now, take us through this, Senator.
Cyril, I think this is very interesting. It is one part of this bill that has been very controversial. Let me say that I was in the last Senate. And in the last Senate, because of the fear of the reactions on the host community interest, we decided to split this bill into 4 parts and then keep the host community separate. But be that as it may, that didn't see the light of the day. But I can assure you, because also in the course of processing this bill serial, we have done a tour of all the host communities. I headed the team that went to Imo and then Arabia. Some people went to Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Delta, and then Ondo. We quite understand. I'm from Akwa Ibom, so we quite understand the precarious situation in the host community. And there's been a lot of sentiment expressed that 13%, like the chief has said, 13% had gone into the derivations. We've had NDDC, we've had Amnesty, we have Ministry of Niger Delta. But for the first time, that we believe that the host community should be able to take their destiny in their own hands, we now said it is just 3% of operating expense, not profit. We had looked at it because we believe that if you look at the budget of an oil and gas company operating in the host community, 70% of that budget is on OPEX, which is the operating expense. And you also know that revenue minus cost is profit. That it is better to place the 3% on the OPEX, which is consistent, than to place it on profit, which can be eroded by cost.
Where do you think this is coming from? When the general, many people who probably have not even seen this act yet.
Cyril, I think that it is going to be more of advocacy, convincing the host community that what the government has done is in the best interest of the country, because you must be able to attract the investment, which is a function of cost competition. Because when an investor is looking at Nigeria, he's looking at Mexico, he's looking at Angola, and he's going to take his money to where cost is lowest. So if you place too much emphasis on cost before profit, you might not really to have anything. So when we say 3% of $20 billion investment is far better than even 10% of $5 billion or 10% of $2 billion. So it is, first of all, attracting the cost, and more so, the implementation of this 3%. It is vested with the host community, so it's to their own benefit. And we run the numbers are alarming too. I believe that if properly and effectively implemented, the host community, there will be peaceful coexistence in the host community. They will all be impacted. And in addition to the host community, Mr. Sri, let me say this. We've also said the gas flaring benefits, penalties, is also going to the host communities, to ameliorate the environment, to remediate the environment. So a lot of incentive more money is coming to the host communities, which is outside the interference of their state government or any other party.
All right, let's talk to Balazaka, the petroleum engineer, and you hear all over the place, 3%. Oh, it's outrageous. And you hear people say, no, this is an injustice. This is why the Petroleum Industry Act will not work. And what we've been trying to do is get someone to tell us, explain what actually the 3%, because so many people are banding figures around. And when you hear the arguments on the streets, no one can tell you exactly what the 3% is. People just go ahead and say, 3% is inadequate, and no one says anything.
Cyril, before I talk about the 3%, please just oblige me this a little time to explain something in connection with this subsidy and this deregulation. First of all, I just need to make it clear. Let's not talk, we shouldn't be academic here. We should be as practical as possible. I'm a practicing petroleum engineer, I'm a chartered accountant, and I'm also a chartered tax analyst. I've worked on land locations, swamp locations, shallow waters, and deep waters. So to a reasonable extent, I can talk. We are talking about a law now, and we are talking about how it should be implemented. So let's please not try to be academic as we were when we had like a 223-page PIB document 7 years ago. Then in the last 5 years, we just came and decided to just balkanize it and had been running round and round in cycles. We just decided to prodigalize things. At the end of the day, we came back to the same consolidated bill. Now it is a law. Please, let's try to be very honest and practical and down to earth. Cyril, as I speak to you today, you're talking about a population of 200 million citizens relying on less than 10 megawatts of electricity to provide energy or power for them. Is it possible? The only way they can survive is to recourse to another source of energy. And that's why people go to the filling station to either buy petrol or diesel. So when I hear people say our petrol or diesel is being smuggled, it's not correct. It's just because we don't have electricity. If you have enough electricity, and you remember, we couldn't even treat our gas to drive gas turbines to generate electricity. If you have electricity today, the first thing that will happen is there will be glut at the filling station. So when I hear people saying that the petrol is being smuggled, it's not correct. It's just because people don't have sources of power. And as I speak to you, the strategic domestic sector, strategic commercial sector, and strategic industrial sector are all depending on less than 10,000 megawatts of electricity. How can there be development? And when I hear people saying we need to go to cleaner fossil fuel, we should do this, fuel is pollutant. As I speak to you right now, there are so many developed economies that are relying on coal to generate energy and also to boost their economy. But I'm not saying we should go back to coal. Yes, gas is a cleaner fossil fuel. Everybody accepts. But we need to be honest and real. If not, sooner or later, operating costs will be so high to the point where even it will be cheaper to import pure water into Nigeria than to produce here. Let's try to be as practical, as honest, and as honest as possible. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, regardless of the interplay of what we want to have with the international community, within Nigeria, we can treat and refine all our crude oil, and we will have the necessary markets. All we need to do is to come into agreement. After all, African Continental Free Trade Area is now there. Regional integration is there. All we need is to go into collaboration, construct rail lines across the West African sub-region. Before you know, we will be those supplying petrol to them. We will be supplying gas. We will even be supplying fertilizer. And before you know, we will have our technicians and depots there, and we'll control the regional economy. So most of the time when we are talking, people forget the situation, the population of Nigeria. And another mistake we are making.
What we're going to do, you've taken out some time to explain, further the bit about deregulation. You still haven't come to the question of the 3%, but we'll still come to you with that question. For now, we have our first caller. Let's go to the phones and listen to Ada from Jos, after which we'll come back to you to speak on the 3%, which is another controversial issue. So, do we still have Ada on the line? No, we don't. So, okay, Balazaka, we're back to you. So now you have explained further the issue about deregulation. Let's now go to the 3% controversy.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, even as far as I was concerned, like probably 6-7 years ago, I had my own definition of host community. As far as I was concerned, a host community must be that community that is associated with the fiscal extraction of crude oil or gas. In other words, you and I can be in the same local government, but if there is no fiscal extraction of crude oil or gas in your community, you don't qualify. But I know that there are so many areas and communities across even the country where pipelines have passed through, where we see activities of crude oil and gas due to probably having depots and the rest. Such communities can be given their own description. As far as I'm concerned, I expected something higher than 3%, but to a reasonable extent, 3% is fantastic. The only thing I want to tell the host community or advise them now is this: nobody should blame NDDC again. You can't blame your local government chairman. You can't blame your councillor. You can't blame your governor. That 3% is coming straight to the community. And at the level of community, our belief is the leaders are always the traditional rulers, the youth leaders, and the women leaders. Our hope is that there will not arise another set of monsters now that will become economic traitors, economic betrayers or vampires of their community. Because most of the time, in fact, that is the problem we even have in Nigeria. When you come up with something like that, from nowhere, the people you expect will implement will now become another set of monsters, which is not good. We hope before even the implementation, they will come together in their community's interest, in their state interest, and by extension, in the interest of Nigeria.
Let's go back to the phones now. We have Ololade calling in from Kwara. Hello, Ololade. Can we get that call through? No, it doesn't seem as if we can get Ololade on the line. Hello?
Good evening. I'm Ololade from Ilorin, Kwara State.
Right, go ahead, but you're not very clear.
Various definitions from various speakers. But I think with the last speaker too that we should be very careful that you don't need to be too academic when we are talking. The idea is quite good. I know that I'm one of those who are against the move of subsidy. But I know definitely that one day the regime is going to come to an end. It's like what we are witnessing now. But my personal opinion is that we should be holistic in whatever approach you are going to use. Not propaganda. It's easy to say this and that. But when it comes to implementation, that's the problem of Nigeria. But at the same time, I wonder what was the focus of those who granted the refinery in the first place. Because I think that for people are feeding fat from the aspect of importing out and importing again. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for calling in. Okay, let's go over now to Houston and talk to Professor Omoregbe, and let's bring on the issue again of who a host community is. How do you define the others who are associated? Now, Balazaka has added something to it. He says a community must be where there's peaceful extraction of this resource. So that's one way of describing it. Now, what do you say?
Thank you. I would first of all say that according to the law, a host community is any place where any sort of petroleum operations are being done. This includes the upstream and the downstream. And so for that reason, wherever any petroleum activity is being carried out, it's being regarded as a host community. And we have a system that is in place that I think really needs to be discussed and dissected. In fact, generally speaking, when you're talking about a law, it's better not to treat it as one whole, but to look at the different areas very, very constructively. I think that there are workable solutions as regards the host communities, but my biggest fear is that by the time you look at it, you will see that the settlor, that is the company, is very, very strong, and the settlor is actually the one that is in control of the entire process, from setting up the trust fund to selecting the trustees and controlling everything that has to do with the trust fund. So the extent to which the people are controlling it is very debatable. As regards the amounts, it appears to be clear that the amounts that are presently being discussed, 3% of the operating costs in the preceding year, are apparently amounts similar to what is presently being spent within the host communities. Because we do need to realize that within the host communities, that is in those places where petroleum production, crude oil production is being undertaken and where gas is being flared, that in those places, very often, unfortunately, the main aspects of development that you see come from the companies and not from the government. So I think it's going to have to be approached in a very delicate and very delicate way and a nuanced way. And I believe that Implementation will allow us to iron out some of the different problems, but there are basic fundamental problems that need to be ironed out. And underlying all this, we need to understand without, I don't want to overemphasize, but the truth is that we have a dysfunctional industry. I mean, for example, when we're talking about the downstream, we forget that we are the only country in the world that's a major producer of oil and a major importer of products. That is a highly dysfunctional state. In the same way, it is dysfunctional for us to have the primary regions that are producing the crude oil and petroleum suffering from the levels of underdevelopment that they presently suffer from. So there are a lot of anomalies in the system. It's like the electricity they are talking, one is talking about we need 200,000 megawatts. We have far less than that. We have under 10. Actually, those are also issues that we do need to deal with.
Okay, Ada from Jos is back on the line. Ada, hopefully we can get you on now. Hello. Hello, Ada, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
Ada, we can hear you.
Hello, Ada from Jos.
Go on.
Okay, now, see, my worry is this definition of host communities. Now, I find it awkward for us to say that where the pipelines go to transverse is referred to as a host community. So even if you want to agree on that 3%, and even if you want to include those communities where the pipelines are transverse, well, it's not fair to say they should still have 3%. Maybe they should be given 1% in the first place, because I'm afraid, not the country achieves before it is hard, because our eggs because before it is hard. Because the way it is sounding now, the people of the Nigerian Delta might start agitating, and all these things we are talking about cannot even come to fruition. So we have to be very careful on this issue, because I don't know, it's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. But if we are talking about money, I'm saying they don't want to put so much money, give us so much money, so it will not, discourage investors. Then why are we giving up to 30% for the frontier building, whatever? Why can't that be 15%? I know there's room to adjust these things, but I commend President Buhari for signing, because all along, all these issues was what made it not to see the light of day. So it's better to get it signed, and then after they can now make adjustments. Then again, if we don't refine our crude here, and go and then get it refined abroad, and then bring it here, when the subsidy is removed, I'm an advocate of subsidy, because this subsidy, most people don't understand it. The subsidy we are having, we are subsidizing it for the rich people, as far as I'm concerned, So, but the problem we have is that because we don't refine here, we send it to all and then come back with this, and then the dollar and all that, makes it expensive, the landing cost. Exactly. So, if we can do it once and for all, and then get it implemented, and channel that money into health, education, and maybe the infrastructure and all that, that will help us impact on the life of the ordinary Nigerians. Nigerians are very easy to get on with. The only problem we have is that our politicians live a flamboyant life. We can suffer, provided they are suffering along with us, but they don't. One of them are either they have private jet or they charter private jet. When you see such things, how will you see? That is the problem we have in Nigeria.
Okay.
Let's not give up on this country. That's my take this evening.
Thank you very much, Ada from Jos, and it's a very good time to bring in Dr. Timothy Okon, especially in the matter of 3%, host communities, and those that have the pipelines through them. Dr. Okon, you would need to take us through this. Okay, we'll try to get Dr. Okon back in the discussion. So, Dr. Kailani Mohammed, are you there? Good. So let's hear you.
Well, I think the defense of the whole community is a wonderful thing, a national advantage for them. And the Senate President recently promised that from time to time they are going to review the law if there are going to be any increment for them. So I think they have to take, and it's a good one because translate into enormous resources which will go directly to the host community. Then let me, later acquaintance, I understood by psychological factor that Tazaka in Lagos missed the target by saying that there are no leakages. Only recently, the custom boss came out and told us that he cannot man all our borders because they smuggle out petroleum products in this country. And even in the creeks, he should be able to analyze that one too. Then secondly, somebody mentioned about frontier. Yes, this country belongs to all of us. And if, see, Anambra State is part of frontier, then Cross River is part of frontier, and they are all from Niger Delta. I don't see any reason why people should be saying, why did they allocate that 30% for the northern part for the exploitation of petroleum, for production of crude oil? I think this country, we kept saying, is our country. We don't have any other country. Let us come together, whether you're a TV man, you're a Nupe man, you're a Hausa. We don't have any other country apart from Nigeria. If we can come together, despite our differences, all these things people are saying will be out of the question. So 3% for now. I have many friends in Niger Delta. For example, when we are in Wari, in Niger Delta, in the 80s, on the job training, after 20 years, when we visited those areas, the same thing, no development, nothing, because they have NDDC, they have 13% derivation, they have a Niger Delta Ministry. We are not talking of the past Ampadek. And even government used to do intervention from time to time, but their politicians and the obas and chiefs, this money goes into their private pockets. So that's why government is saying with this money now, it will be going directly to the host communities. And the way he defined whether you have a peaceful, contact with a community, that's what defined what a host community is. For us, Niger Delta is Niger Delta, and we are Nigerians. They are entitled, where all these pipelines, the routes go through, they will be entitled to it. And it seems from the video you just played now, Mr. Cyril, the Niger Deltas are happy. Those that are not happy are the ones now that will be losing out from this new act. So we want them to come, join hands, and make sure that this very PIB Act succeeds. If it does, Nigeria is going to be a haven. Then, lastly, we are calling on those that will manage this thing. Refineries before, we normally maintain them. When we run refineries for 2 years, we normally go for turnaround maintenance for 43 days. 40 days, all the equipment will work on them. 3 days will be blackout. We start again for another 2 years. The refinery will never come down. It doesn't mean there are no problems here and there, but all we need is honesty, sincerity of purpose.
Okay, it's at that point we'll take up the phones again, and Umar, who's calling in from Birnin Kebbi. Umar, let's hear you.
Yes.
Umar, I want to believe it's Umar Anachi, right?
Umar Anachi calling from
Good. Go ahead.
You see, I'd like to congratulate Muhammad Buhari for his political will. It is really quite commendable. It is time immemorial that I had this PID is going to be passed into law. is going to be passed into law. Now that it's passed into law, to God be the glory. But my own question is that how will the common man will benefit from this BID? And the second thing is, I heard you saying upstream, downstream. Can you please explain to me as a layman what is this upstream means, what is this downstream means?
Okay.
Then the implementation of this petroleum industry deal, can it be lead to the reduction of price of petroleum, let's say like less than 50 naira? Can we expect that reduction in price? Thank you, Ciro, for the opportunity given to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umar Anachi. And it's a good thing that Dr. Timothy Okon is back with us. Yes, he's back there. We have you here with us again. Right? Okay. So, Dr. Timothy Okon, it's a very good time for you to come back in. 3% host communities. And if you heard our last caller, Umar Anachi, upstream, downstream, he says we're speaking a little bit above many of our viewers. He needs to know what is upstream and what is downstream, and the question many Nigerians would want to ask: will this lead to the reduction of the price of petrol to, say, like he said, for instance, 50 naira, or, as I say, will it lead to an increase in the pump price of petrol to something like 400 and 400 plus, has been bandied around in some sections?
Well, I will talk about the definitions of upstream, midstream, and downstream. Upstream really refers to the operations that lead to the extraction. Oil exists mostly in reservoirs or containers underneath the ground, right? And so upstream refers to the process of extracting hydrocarbons. That is, you drill wells and then it comes to the surface and then it's processed and stabilized. So that refers to upstream petroleum operations. Then the midstream is the process by which you either process the that is, you take the crude oil and you put it in a refinery, but usually before it gets to a refinery, it's either shipped in large vessels. So it's shipped in large vessels, or it is via pipeline. Okay, so that refers to the midstream, whether it is oil or gas, because you can process gas also and put gas in a pipeline. So the midstream refers to this large-scale processing and transportation of hydrocarbons. Downstream is distribution and marketing. That is the final stop, more or less. Okay, so when you go to a petrol station where you have refined petroleum products, it has gone through refining and it's then distributed through petrol stations. The same would apply to gas. Distribution and marketing, it goes to what is called a city gate, and then there are distribution pipelines which distribute the hydrocarbons. So the oil and gas value chain has that upstream, the midstream, and then the downstream. So that's by way of a definition. Well, how is the price of a refined product now? That's a product that comes out of a refinery priced. You see, the price of oil, crude oil that is determined internationally. Crude oil is a commodity. And apart from discounting due to the type of the crude, the quality of the crude, the sulfur content or the total acid number, etc., and I hope I have not confused you, but that goes into a refinery and the refinery buys the crude. The international price of the crude which actually just it's about the same in most parts of the world. So the price of the refined product, it's usually the price of the crude plus the cost of processing that crude in a refinery and profit margin. So invariably, the price of a refined product would be the price of the crude plus the processing cost, or what is called the crack spread. Now, is that price 50 naira? Well, it could be if the price of oil, like recently during the pandemic, the price of oil was literally quite low, actually. There was widespread reporting of the price of oil being $0. Okay? So in that case, you could have that kind of a situation. But whether you refine it in Nigeria or you refine it elsewhere, fundamentally, the price of the refined product will reflect the price of the crude and the cost of processing that crude in a refinery anywhere in the world. Okay? So the price will be determined, in other words, by the price of the crude. Nigeria doesn't fix the price of crude, unfortunately. And I don't want to go to a complicated discussion. I've been told not to be academic, and according to Bala, and he says, this is the first person in 43 years say that I am speaking dishonestly. So I don't want to go into the complications of explaining that process, because I'm an expert in it. That's what I do. I've done it for 43 years. Now, whether you are going to get a price of 400 naira, etc., it's a function of the exchange rate. So finally, it's a function of the exchange rate, all right? That is in Nigeria, okay? Now, if there is a government policy that results in the devaluation, etc., of course, the price of the crude is not set in this jurisdiction, that is in this country. And therefore, and it's mostly quoted in dollars, and you have done devaluation, then that price would go up. So recent speculation on prices of refined products have to do with the price of the crude itself, okay? And of course, the exchange rate. Okay. So I hope I have addressed that question.
Yes,
then
you have.
Well, 3%.
Well, just before we go off you, there's also the matter of the host communities, which was what we wanted you to talk about initially when we couldn't reach you. The host community and what the law says. Who is the host community? And there have been so many definitions in, around about who the host community is.
Consistent with the value chain in petroleum operations, the upstream and the midstream and downstream. These are, the definition was done so as to capture, in an oil field, okay, you may have an aggregation of oil fields, and then you have gas or oil gathering pipelines to a production platform, okay? You would have a community that might exist, okay, where you have those gathering pipelines. So you need to recognize the fact that there is hydrocarbon that are gathered in the upstream, and it's called the upstream. So if you want to choose on upstream petroleum operations, that includes gathering pipelines that gathers it to a production platform, and then it takes it to either with a midstream pipeline that will go to a terminal. So the communities that are associated with this are rightfully regarded as host communities. So that strictly is the way in which you approach defining what. So it's not only extraction, but included in that is the gathering system that goes with it. After all, you have the Trans-Niger pipeline, the Nembe Creek trunk line, and so on in the Niger Delta. So you cannot say that those are not transportation pipelines, and that's where most of our weakest link is, where you have puncturing of the pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the broad definition of a host community. I think this law has avoided the general term impacted communities, because that becomes a bit hazy and vague. So we've tried to restrict it to this definition that it has to be an area where you have upstream and midstream petroleum operations, and those are defined terms in the PIA.
Okay. Well, Senator, you've heard a lot of people say, well, no, that a gathering of pipelines, like Dr. Kuhn has just explained, shouldn't be referred to as a host community, that the host community should be just those places where oil is extracted from. And so those who have a gathering of pipelines passing through them
not should, downstream.
Well, yeah, downstream. Shouldn't be. So,
yes, just like Dr. Kuhn actually said, what the law defines a host community is those communities within which the oil is extracted. Of course, the oil is extracted and has to be gathered and then piped to a flow station. That's what the law recognizes.
Right.
The law does not recognize the host community like a filling station. No.
Exactly.
It doesn't.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but you do hear people now saying no, that this is an attempt to give some revenue to communities, that oil is not extracted from those communities, it's just pipelines that pass through them, the crude pipelines. Clarify for us what exactly.
I think for me, like Dr. Kona actually stated, there is a process involved in the extraction, gathering, because if you look at a license might cover some kilometer radius, and those kilometer radius are also covered by communities. Because that's the way license is defined.
Exactly.
So every community that is defined within the context of this of this definition is a host community. That's why we now say it will be the responsibility of a settler, which is the oil company extracting the oil, to know exactly which of the communities are around it. The law is very clear. There is no ambiguity whatsoever. So we are conscious of what we did, and we believe that if we efficiently follow this law, there will not be any issues. Leave this to the community to determine their destiny, and I believe that there will be. The clear essence here is to achieve peaceful coexistence, so that this oil can flow, and the people can also derive maximum benefit. The nation can also share its own side of the revenue.
Now, this takes us to the question of regulation, for instance, and this is another bit where people have expressed concern that what would now happen? The NNPC, as you know it, will become a company. It's going to break up, and the regulation will now be at different levels. So someone asks, under the PIA, would the Petroleum Equalization Fund still be relevant?
Once you attend full deregulation, you don't need to equalize. It's as simple as that. And most of the law that we have passed has also handed over the assets and the liabilities of the Petroleum Equalization Fund into the authority, because that becomes a directorate within the context of the midstream and downstream regulatory authority. So once you attend full regulations, then they don't need to equalize. It's as simple as that. But there's a timeline. There's also equally transition period that will actually take care and accommodate all the existing liabilities. And the law is also very clear on how those liabilities will be clearly settled towards to move to a ground zero. That's as simple as that.
Okay, let's go over to Lagos now, and Balazaka. Do you envisage any challenges with that as well? The NNPC becoming a company now, and the other, the other entities that will be unbundled. Do you envisage challenges there as well?
Like I keep saying, it depends, but the steering committee has a lot to do. You see, when we are even talking about the refineries, as far as I'm concerned, we have failed in the health sector. We have failed in the education sector. We have failed in many sectors. So I wasn't surprised that we also failed as far as the refineries were concerned. But there is just one index that has been rubbishing everything about all those sectors, and that index is called corruption. As far as I'm concerned, honestly, corruption is an attitude, just like prostitution, just like alcoholism, just like drug abuse. So if we want to move away from a bad attitude, we can move away from a bad attitude. And when you talk about the sectors of an economy, I mean, sectors can be deregulated, they can be commercialized, they can be liberalized, they can even be privatized. But you just have to look at the sector and think of which restructuring mechanism you can deploy. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, the telecom sector was not deregulated. It was liberalized. There are some sectors that will do well when you privatize them. Some will do well when you commercialize them. Some will do well when you deregulate them. But at the end of the day, all we want is to make sure the country keeps growing. Because as far as I am concerned, Nigeria is rich, but Nigeria is not a wealthy country or nation. You can only become wealthy if you are able to grow the economy. But apart from growing the economy, you also need to develop your economy. But yes, we are rich in mineral resources, we are rich in human capital. But to what extent have we crystallized that? So when some of us are saying that Nigerians are growing under pains, look at, like we said, the inflation. The minimum wage is still frozen at about less than about 18,000 naira today per 18,000 naira, which is less than even $50. So all we are talking about is let us avoid anything that will trigger, economic tsunami or anarchy, because there is this saying that the seed of growth and development can only be planted on the soil of peace. So we want a situation where somehow, somewhere, the economic pains will not be so much to the point where we will lose that seed, and we should be able to grow, so that will make us to lose that peace. We should be able to grow the seed of development. And another point I want to say is this: like we said, regardless of what we discuss, it will boil down to a simple thing. How much will the price of pure water cost? How much will a liter of petrol cost? But I hear some people saying already there are plans to bring in 10,000 vehicles. Even if you bring 10,000 buses, divide them by 774 local governments, and you will see the ratio. And some even states even have local government development communities. So if you say we are planning palliatives, it's like saying you want to create a wound, then start looking for the drug. If possible, why not avoid it? And as far
out of
as
time, we just have a few more minutes to go. So we'd like to just take the closing comments of our other guests on tonight. So let me quickly go over to Professor Omoregbe in Houston. Your closing comments as we round off tonight. Bala has just drawn attention to one big thing that will knock all the good things about this law: corruption.
That is not a PIA issue. That is a national issue that has to do with good governance. And the law is trying to address good governance. It's trying to put in structures to ensure that regulation, commercial activities, and policy activities are divided into and done by the different institutions. Is trying to ensure that we have an open and transparent process. Where you do have an open and transparent process, it's very difficult to have corruption in the same way. So we expect that to be a very, very big change. We expect that with the implementation, we will be able to start moving forward. We'll be ready. The law doesn't do anything about the net zero economy. It doesn't deal with things like that, but we will at least be on the way to having an industry that shall help us as we transit into cleaner fuels, that shall help us to be strengthened, that shall help us to ensure that we truly have development within Nigeria. So far, it has eluded us. But with the passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill and its implementation, we have a chance to set things right and to learn from our past mistakes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Timothy Okun, quickly, in just a minute or so, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my take on the petroleum industry is it's a good start. There is a lot of work that needs to be done with respect to implementation, but and then the necessary regulations that need to accompany any such law, because the law doesn't cover every detail of things that would need to be done. So that drafting of regulations would be important and a key thing. And yes, the bill itself is not a revenue distribution bill among the national and subnational governments, as people may want to see it as. It is not. There is a revenue distribution bill, and that usually is handled separately. What the PIA does is to give Nigeria a fresh start in trying to cure some of the mistakes of the past and open up the industry for economic development. And I believe that the benefits will be clear and quite compelling when we've run this and implemented what is in the law.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kelani Mohammed, in 30 seconds, if you can.
Cyril, all we need to do in this country, we need fairness and justice, honesty and sincerity of purpose. I think if we take them as our cardinal principles, Nigeria is going to be a great place. We have good people now in the oil industry whom we think they have been doing their best to make sure that the new company delivers. So I'm calling on all Nigerians, despite our differences, let us come together, form a formidable force so that Nigeria would be a great place. It took US over 200 years before they became what they are today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much. And, the last word for a distinguished senator here.
Well, Cyril, I think let me, on behalf of the National Assembly, appeal to Nigerians and relevant stakeholders for their patience, and to also assure you that we will deploy effective oversight to ensure that this bill is fully implemented and desired objectives also achieved. And then we want to assure you that, like we were assuring Mr. President, that if there is anything that has to be amended, to make the industry more effectively run, and also to derive the much desired impact on the lives of the average Nigerians, we will not hesitate to do so. Okay. So we are not where we are supposed to be, or we are not also where we used to be as a country.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator. And thank you to Bala Zaka from Lagos Network Center, Professor Inka Omoregbe, who we linked up from Houston, Dr. Timothy Okun here in Abuja, and Dr. Kailani Mohammed from Kaduna via Zoom. Thank you very much for being part of this program, and particularly Dr. Kailani Mohammed, good to see you, really. It's been a long, long, long time from the days in Kappa. Good to see you again. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to all those who called in too, and those who watched till the end. Well, thank you for being part of this program. Next week we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.